I've saved my progress as spline-like curve.ai, so called because this is not a real spline curve. Illustrator doesn't support those. This is a spline that I faked using the round corners effect. The file's, of course, found inside the O9 Pen Tools folder. In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to modify one of these fake splines, including, by the way, how to add corners. Notice that every single one of my corners has now been rounded off by the round corners effect. So what do? Well, the first thing I do is I get rid of this fill because I can't see what I'm doing at all. The swatches panel tells me that the fill is active because white is the active swatch. I'll go ahead and press the slash key in order to replace that fill with none, like so. Then I'll press the A key to switch to the white arrow tool. No sense in pressing the control key or the command key for an extended period of time. I've got to drag a bunch of these points to new locations. And notice as you drag any one of these anchor points, you're tugging the path outline in that direction. So in some cases, it's very important that you get the path outline exactly where you want it. In other areas, it's important that you drag the path outline a little too far, like so that you're cheating into an area that's going to be covered up by another path. For example, where the lips are concerned, you want to get the path outline inside those yellow lips because the yellow lips are going to cover things up. But of course, we've got a big problem right there. Big, huge rounding right at the intersection of the lips. We'll come back to that in just a moment. I'm going to drag these guys to different locations like so. Beware, by the way, of deselecting the path. And the reason I say this, notice if I click off the path in order to deselect it, it's hard to find the path again. Notice if I click right there at an obvious location along the path outline, right? If I click on it, Illustrator doesn't select the path. And the reason is the path's not really there. We're dealing with a dynamic effect. Round corners is being applied on the fly. If I press Control Y or Command Y to switch to the outline mode, you can see this is the actual path outline. This is where Illustrator thinks it is. If I hover my arrow cursor over an area that's really path outline, I'll see the little black square telling me that something's there. So keep an eye out for that. All right, I'll press Control Y, Command Y again to switch back to the preview mode. And notice right out there is where I see the black square. If I click, then I select the path. So you've got to bear that in mind when you're working with dynamic effects inside of Illustrator. Things aren't always where they appear to be. All right, let's go ahead and drag this point up a little bit. You know what? I want to add a couple of points. So I'm going to press the P key in order to switch back to the pen tool. I'll click at this location like so in order to add an anchor point right there. And that kind of changes the curvature in a sort of strange way. So we'll go ahead and zoom in, move things around a little bit. I'm pressing the control key or the command key on the Mac in order to get my white arrow tool, incidentally, as I drag these points to different locations. Notice right there, what I want is a corner right at that location under the nostril. So I want this path to curve around, bang, there's a corner, curve again into the lip. And in order to accomplish this, I'm going to have to add a few more anchor points by clicking along this segment with my pen tool. And then I'll control drag this anchor point to this location. It's not going to look like a corner at all. We're going to get this weird taper nose effect. And what I do in order to create something resembling a corner is to move the anchor points very close together, not exactly on top of each other, but very close together like so. And that will create something resembling a corner when I'm working with this faked spline curve. All right, now I'll set another anchor point at this location just by clicking on a segment, and I'll control drag or command drag the anchor points to better locations. I'll click at this location to add an anchor point right there, and then I'll control drag this anchor point and so on until I get the curves that I'm looking for. So this is a fairly imprecise science when you're working with spline curves. Again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand what's going on, but nor do you have very much control over the results. All right, I'm just dragging these guys to better locations so things look more or less the way I want them to. I'll scroll down here to the corner of the mouth. This is really a problem at this point. I'll click right there to add a point, and I'll click right there to add a point. And now we have something more closely resembling a corner. And I'll control drag this anchor point down a little bit, command drag on the Mac, control or command drag this guy up a little bit in order to make sure we're staying inside of the lips. So we don't need a sharp corner right there because it's going to be hidden. This green face path is going to be hidden by the yellow lips, but I do want to make sure that we're well inside of those yellow lips like so. And I might go ahead and add an anchor point at this location, drag it down, drag this guy over like so, add another anchor point here. So again, it's just going to take a little bit of messing around to get this right. Now, The thing about true Bezier curves, which we'll investigate shortly, is that they do take a little bit of experience to understand how they work. However, they don't require near this much fussing with. So again, these fake spline curves, even though they're easy to understand, they are a little bit of a pain in the neck to work with. All right, anyway, once you get something that looks more or less good, which is, I guess, what I have. I'm not sure it's anything to write home about, but it's getting the job done. But I'm still fussing with mine, aren't I? Once you get things the way you want them, and I'm happy now, let's pretend, then go ahead and assign a fill. So go up here to the swatches panel, and you'll see that I've given you a fill of green to work with already. However, if you'd rather lift your fill color from the original tracing template, then go ahead and grab the eyedropper tool right there. You can also get it by pressing the I key. And you could click in a tracing template to lift a color. If you do that, by the way, you'll replace the fill. You'll also get rid of the stroke, so that's not what you want. Go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. To lift a color from the tracing template, press the Shift key and click with that eyedropper, and then you'll go ahead and replace the active attribute, which is fill in my case. That still doesn't look right, and the reason is we're getting a very pale green because the eyedropper is looking at the appearance of the color of the tracing template. That is to say, it's been faded to 50%, so that's the color that it's seeing. If you need to lift a rich color from that tracing template, then press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that operation. Double-click on that ancient image layer, change the dim image value to 100%, like so. Click OK, and then shift-click in order to lift a color. And that one's too dark, so I'd undo and try shift-clicking again to lift a different shade of green. All right, that looks pretty good to me, but you know what? The color that I created for you in advance looks even better. I basically did lift the color, incidentally, from the tracing template, and then I modified it inside the color panel. But in your case, you might want to simplify things just by clicking on green. That replaces the fill like so. And I'm also going to return to the ancient image layer, double-click on it, and change that dim images value back to 50%. All right, that's it, folks. I'll go ahead and twirl open the drawing layer and turn back on the spikes paths. In the next exercise, we're going to see how to work with true Bezier curves inside Illustrator.